We are Myth Vision. Welcome back to Myth Vision Podcast. Your host, Derek Lambert, and we're talking to Alicia, XJW. The conversation, I know for a fact, coming from the Jehovah's Witness church, if you will, organization, cult, as I like to call it. It's really harming a lot of people's lives, and a lot of people who've escaped or have made it away from the Jehovah's Witness church have found a lot of freedom in life, apart from having that high control cult completely control their mind, their actions, who they're allowed to talk to, who they're allowed to hang out with, and some of the crazy stuff that happens. Sometimes you get to hear from the people I interview. So with that being said, Alicia, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I am too. I wanted to ask up front, because most of the people who come on are born into the Jehovah's Witness church. Were you born into it? Were your family? Can you give us a little background about, where you come from?
Yeah, for sure. I was born in, and my parents were also born in. And before them, my grandparents, my grandma was born in, and my grandpa was not. So yeah, my heritage goes pretty deep. My entire family is Jehovah's Witnesses on both of my parents' side, aside from just a few. As far as I know, I'm the only one who's taken a step back to be like, is any of this actually real? And so there's a few who have been disfellowshipped or disassociated, who have left willingly or left because they had to. And so, yeah, I've got a huge family, and all of them are in the religion, and being raised this way is, you don't really realize how much it's going to affect you until you're on the outside kind of looking back. And I find I still have moments where something will happen in my life and I'm like, do I think this way because of what I was told? Like, do I have a good reason to think this? Or is this just residual indoctrination from childhood? It's a lot.
It sounds almost like, and, I want us to be freely open talking, of course, it's the most comfortable conversation. Nobody's watching us right now. It's just you and me. Yeah. And I say that to say, I know it sounds to me that, you're kind of like wrestling with that idea. Like, I know my family's in, and you haven't obviously become apostate in their eyes yet. So there's that fear of like, am I wrong? Am I right? And you see the truth in this, the truth about the truth, but it's scary, especially when your whole family's there. Is it worth sacrificing that for the pleasure of freedom of what you want to believe?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because honestly, that's really what I wrestled with the most. I tell people all the time, because I find one of the biggest frustrations I'll get from people is being told, oh, you left because you just want to sin, or you just didn't study hard enough. You didn't make it. You just didn't try. Right. And I'm like, I left my faith kicking and screaming. I did not want it to be false. Like it didn't matter what was coming my way. I was still like, no, this is still different. Like, Jehovah exists. This is a thing. My relatives who have passed, I'm going to see them again. Like, I could not let go. It was really, really hard. And I knew the consequence. I knew that if I was labeled an apostate, I knew what I had to lose. And that's one of the things that I've tried to communicate to my family, is that I know the price of being an apostate. I know this price. I calculated the cost, and I decided that this is not true. This is just not worth staying for and being miserable and feeling like everything I do is being policed, and like I can't fully be myself. I was like, I can't live like that. If this is the only life I have that I know for sure, I can't live in a box. I just can't.
Are you POMO, POMO? What are you?
POMO. I'm out. Yeah.
Okay. So how does your family know? Yes.
So they know. I've been pretty honest. And sometimes I wish I wasn't, but I'm that way. Yeah. I did tell my parents while I was having doubts the things that were really bothering me. And those conversations obviously didn't go great, especially with my mom. My mom is very much like me. And so she has a hard time when she gets really emotional to hear what I have to say. So it's hard. And, you know, it's hard to hear your parents with that voice of disappointment and the tears in their eyes when you say like, hey, you know, at this point, I tried to put it as nicely as possible. I just simply said, right. I'm not sure if I believe in God anymore, even though I knew I didn't. But I wasn't quite ready to push it that far with them. I just wanted to say, there just doesn't seem to be good evidence for me to be basing my entire life on something that I can't even prove the most basic piece of, which is, does God even exist? And if I can't do that, why am I trying to fit myself into this box, try to be a part of this organization that, even all other things aside, has many, many flaws in it? Why am I trying to do this if I can't even prove the most basic piece of this to myself? And I tried to communicate that, but it's, you know, it's really hard when they're indoctrinated.
Don't you want to be in paradise, Alicia? I mean,
yeah.
You know, don't you want to be with your family forever on earth? And I mean, that's what they say. That's the things they do. And I get that from Christians all the time. To me, you know, don't you want to go to heaven? Don't you want to be, you know, you can see where I'm going with that, like family, don't you want to be there? And what's the alternative? Well, for me, the alternative is different than it is for you, coming from my family that are Christians. Yours is you get completely eliminated and are no more. Yeah, that's better than mine. I'm getting cooked. God's got a barbecue going and I must taste pretty delicious. So
like a great
guy. I'm just being silly. So what was the process? We need to go through this process because someone might be watching, sitting on the fence. They've got their doubts. You might say something they haven't thought of, or they might look at it new in an angle that you are approaching this. So when you were active member, did you do pioneering? Tell me about your, like, what level of commitment did you have to the JWs in your local area?
Yeah, I was your regular rank and file. I auxiliary pioneered from time to time, so I didn't have like a yearly requirement of hours. It was just whenever I could. I did some need greater activity where you get to travel to another country and do the preaching work there. I went to Costa Rica twice, which was fantastic, beautiful place. Nice. Probably the best memory I have, honestly. But I was really active in my own congregation. I really enjoyed being on the theocratic ministry school, so getting to like be on stage and give talks. I just naturally enjoy talking and public speaking. It's just, I love talking. But
that's good.
I tried really hard to be active. I was always the person who would have their hand up at all the meetings with comments. And I was constantly being told that I was really good at applying the information to real life. And I really felt like I was a useful tool and that I could really help people. And it made me feel great. And so once I lost that, I kind of have circled back around and been like, I was really useful to this organization. Now that I realize that that wasn't really a good thing, can I still be useful on the other side? Which is, you know, why I'm here right now.
Right.
But yeah, I just, I was just a regular rank and file person, but I was fully dedicated. I never in a million years thought that I would ever question anything. Never.
We're going to get into that because I got to know what happened. But I must say, for me, being a recovering drug addict, someone who's come through the addiction and survived, my weakest thing, it's kind of a weird parable, or if you will, a proverb of my life, is that my biggest weakness has become my biggest strength. So whatever that thing is in your life that you thought was your strength, or maybe it was going to work out and it didn't, somewhere in the vein of it, it still becomes your largest strength, if you will. So for me, I have a YouTube channel where I talk and help drug addicts, and I made it out. We're talking like heroin drugs, like shooting up drugs. And people are like, what the, you don't look like you ever did that. Well, yes, I did. And so it became my strength. And a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses, what I really love about XJWs is the passion that you guys carry in trying to help those you know are in this bubble, and it's almost impenetrable. The only people who can really penetrate it are those who were where they are, because they're not going to listen. Now, they're supposed to not listen to you guys, but they're not going to listen to me, who's never been a JW, doesn't speak the lingo, doesn't know the language, doesn't know the world necessarily that you guys live in. They're going to listen to you. So, Alicia, let me probe deeper. I suspect somewhere along the line, something came up, either a person. Look, I sound like I should do tarot cards. I sound like I'm a predictor. Like, let me predict. No, but it's
watching. They're gonna love that.
They're gonna love it. Yeah, goodness gracious. Watch out for the Smurf too. I'm just kidding. But no, but like, it usually comes down to this. That's why I say I predicted this is something that either it's people that you saw that you were like, hold on, this doesn't add up. How can this be true in God's church, or a doctrine or something like that, got you like, what the heck? What am I believing? So tell me what it was for you. And it might not be one thing, it might be many.
It was definitely multiple things. I think, like, now that I really reflect and think about the things that were bothering me that I kind of put away, the first thing I would say would be, I have a sister, and my sister has never really taken anything seriously. Like, she believes it, but she's just not a part of it. And it's been that way for most of our lives. And I remember coming home from a meeting one night and just sitting and crying, because I was like, I can't lose my sister at Armageddon. And it does not make me feel any better when someone tells me that Jehovah will make me forget, like that I'll forget that my sister, my flesh and blood sister, ever existed. And I was like, that's just like, I don't want to forget her. I don't want that. And that was something that really bothered me, but I kind of just had to put it away and not think about it, and just keep on hoping, the way my parents are hoping for me now, that maybe she would come around someday. But that was something that really, really bothered me, because my sister is awesome, and she and I are close in age, and we our whole lives together. And I was just like, telling me that I'll forget about her in paradise someday just wasn't enough for me. And then besides that, I really was disappointed in people. And I know a lot of people will hear that and be like, oh, but it's not about people. It is for me, because I'm a people person, and I'm very, very affected by the people around me. And when people hurt me, that is one of the things that cuts the deepest. And I was really hurt by the people that I thought were like my closest friends. I had a best friend who I thought would always be there for me, who just kind of fell off the earth when I was having my own personal struggles with my mental health. She just kind of disappeared, and then eventually resurfaced one day. I opened Instagram and saw that she got married. And I was like, would have been nice to have known that my best friend was getting married. I thought we had talked about being in each other's weddings someday, like, guess not. And just things like that. The people who I thought were just always going to be there for me, they fell off the earth. And I was just like, I didn't get treated like this by the people I was friends with when I was in high school. And they're supposed to be the wicked ones, right? So now here I am, like a grown woman, and I'm feeling like the people around me are behaving like children. Like, this isn't what I signed up for. I thought I could expect better. But I think the worst for me was just, I went through a period of really tough depression. I was genuinely in my bed for months, and I couldn't get up. And at that point, I was really, really suffering, and I would call into the meetings. So instead of attending the kingdom halls, you can call in and listen, which was always frowned upon, but now everybody's on Zoom. So I guess it's not so bad, eh? But I would call in and I would pray every day, because I'm in my bed. There's nothing else going on. And I was just like, anything at all, if I could just hear something encouraging in the meeting, or in a comment, or in someone's prayer. If I read my daily text, which is a book that gives you a scripture every day and a little bit of information to meditate through your day, anywhere, if I could just find something that would speak to me in some way to make me feel like God cared about me and that he wanted me to get back up, then I could push myself to do that. And it wasn't happening. And eventually I reached this point where I was like, I've wasted months off my life in my bed. and I'm begging for any kind of answer. And I'm actually refining my prayers to be more and more vague, just to make more wiggle room for God to give me some kind of reply. And eventually I was like, you know what? I don't feel like anyone's listening. And it was the first time I actually took a step back and was like, is anyone listening? Because my understanding was that God would never allow you to be tempted beyond what you can bear. And I felt like I was being pushed beyond my limits and I wasn't going to make it. And I was like continuously being told that because I'm an imperfect human, I can't really make that call. But I was like, I literally feel like I'm wasting away. I'm going to die in my bed if I don't get up. And God doesn't think that this is beyond what I can bear. And that was really the breaking point for me, was just unanswered prayers.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That whole thing is, I want to say up front that you are an amazing person. I can already tell that, you know, I suspect whoever you hang out with is probably like, you carry a very positive vibe, you know, very optimistic energy with you. And so anyone who's hanging out with you knows this is going to be a good conversation. We're going to be happy, go lucky, that kind of thing. My wife always tells me, she's like, you're too optimistic. I wish I had some of that energy. But how did you go through this depression being such a happy person, right? Like,
yeah.
So don't get me wrong. Things happen. Mental health issues happen. Things happen. But I can definitely relate and get where you're coming from on that. And friends, you know, friends, I found more atheist friends, and I'm just saying this as a plug, kind of, that it doesn't require you to believe. And I'm not saying you have to not be a believer, but it doesn't require you to be a religious believer, a believer in something afterlife, or you're going to get a reward from God, you know, if you act a certain way or be nice. That oftentimes is fickle, and it's you're literally doing it for that personal reward from your God, divine, whatever, later on. It's almost like, what about just making that person themselves happy? What if you wanted to make yourself happy in a selfish way? Not saying it's bad. So, you know, that I hear a lot of people who have something from the church that they just aren't given, or they ignore and neglect. And you're like, they're supposed to feel this part. They're supposed to come in and help me in this situation, make me feel better. But the prayer didn't work for you. So obviously you had to consider things. So you start doubting. Obviously, you're like, I don't think there's anything there. I suspect you watched some videos, though. I just have a hard time thinking that you were like, you must have ran across something. I don't know.
Honestly, I didn't for a long time. Like, my first initial doubting period really hit in like 2018. And I genuinely would not look at anything until maybe like the end of 2019. I really started to dig into it. But it's kind of funny how it happened, because I sort of went down a rabbit hole that led me to watching apostate material. And I always kind of laugh about it because it's silly. But what happened was I started watching videos of people debating flat earthers because I thought it was funny. And I enjoyed just seeing facts and science and proven things, disproving something that's pretty silly. And that took me down a rabbit hole of watching creationist versus evolution debates. And I was really like disappointed in the arguments coming from the creation side, because at that point I was still thinking God exists, evolution, I know everything there is to know. I didn't know anything. And I was like just surprised by how bad the arguments were. And I kept saying to my partner at the time, I was like, you know, if Jehovah's Witnesses got up there and debated, though, they'd have good answers. They would roast these guys. And he was like, yeah, sure. Okay. And I ended up looking at some of like Jehovah's Witnesses literature to try and see what their answers were to certain topics that would come up. And the big one was always Noah and the flood, because a lot of people, like, I always accepted that the flood happened. And I honestly was under the impression that we had like discovered the ark and that we had concrete evidence that it happened, because obviously a global flood like, you're going to have something left over from that, right? And then I was surprised to find that we don't. We don't have really anything. And the best information I could find was really just musings about what some information might mean. It's like, I remember reading out of an article published by the Watchtower that basically just said that maybe we are misinterpreting some of the evidence, that things we think are ice ages were actually the flood. And I was like, I don't really think that we would mess something like that up. Like, I just feel like that is such a, like, don't we need something more concrete than just like a question of what if? And that was really disturbing to me when I was like, oh my goodness, I thought that young earth creationists were silly for believing the earth is only 6,000 years old. And here I am, and I'm seeing equally as silly arguments coming from Jehovah's Witnesses. And I was like, that was a really big game changer for me. I was like, okay, I definitely have more to look into here. I am not finding what I thought I was going to find when I go back to the literature.
That's interesting, because for you, it was almost like, I'm not going to apostate material because that's the last place I want to go.
Yeah.
I'll go somewhere safe. I'll go somewhere that isn't apostate. And you find yourself in apostasy altogether, not realizing that they're not XJWs. So, or they're not apostates of this, that. I'm listening to an actual Christian who believes in the same Bible I do, maybe a little things differently, but debate this guy over here who's saying something else. That's interesting that you took kind of a different route.
Yeah, it was a very strange route to take, I guess, but it kind of makes me laugh when I think about it. So I guess I'm okay with it.
Yeah. Okay. So you really got into that realizing, okay, there's some problems here for sure. How did that affect you as an active member? Like what took place? Did you tell your parents and then you said, look, I just don't want to go anymore? Or
well, what happened was, so I had stopped attending meetings in 2018. I did try to go back, and I really needed it to go well, and it didn't. So I had not been attending meetings for quite a while. And then I believe it was like September 2018. I was like, okay, Mom, I'll go to a meeting with you. And I need it to go well. I'm praying. I'm like, if it goes well, like, I'm going to push myself. I'm going to get back. I'm going to do this. And when I went there, the best friend that had gotten married and not told me was visiting my congregation that day. And she came up to me and hugged me and was like, I miss you so much. Like, I hope you're doing okay. And I thought, you have my number. You also know where I live. And you have not contacted me at all. And her husband did not even come over to meet me. And I thought, okay. And it just really, really hurt to be treated like something was wrong with me. Like, obviously I was experiencing something that wasn't great, but I was like, I'm still me, even though I've gone through a dark period and people haven't seen me at the congregations. I've still been calling in all this time. And to be treated that way was just not great. So after that, I stopped attending meetings, and my parents stopped bothering me about it. I actually took a trip. I went to BC for a month, and then I ended up going to Costa Rica for a month because I was not ready to go home because I just needed to be away and think. And I put myself into a little bit of debt doing that, but it gave me the space that I kind of needed to be like, okay, what's the next thing I want to do? So when I came back, I was like, okay, I need to move out because this isn't going to fly. Living under my mom's roof and not attending meetings, this isn't going to work. So I ended up moving out at the very end of the year and just moving in with a bunch of random people because I had no money after traveling. And I ended up moving into a place with 4 other girls, and it ended up being a nice place. Rent was cheap. Public transportation was there until I was able to get a car. And I made that work for a bit. And I was dating somebody, and then I was doing just a lease at the time that was short term. So once that lease was up, I moved in with him, and that made it easier. But so my parents weren't really in my face about it. But what ended up happening in that time was I wasn't ready to tell my family about seeing somebody who was not a witness and moving in with them because it just felt like a lot. And then at the same time, my grandpa suddenly passed away. So
wow. Sorry.
that was thanks. I know it's still hard, but it was really hard on my mom, and I just didn't want to add to that by being like, hey, also me and all my crap going on here. I just was like, maybe I should wait a month or two and just kind of let her deal with that. And of course that didn't work because my mom is she's a bit snoopy like me. We're both kind of like that. So she ended up finding out and accused me of lying to her. And I was like, I swear to God, Mom, I just was waiting. I wasn't trying to hide it from you. But so in that time, they knew that I wasn't really living the life. And I started to really experience that preemptive shunning because they were like, you're living with somebody, we can't talk to you. And that made that really hard. But I didn't tell them about my doubts until quite a bit later. I don't actually think I brought up any of them until 2020. Sometime in 2020, I would have first told them.
You waited till you had to be separated. Yeah. Mom and Dad, hey, listen, so you don't get to whoop my ass. I'm just kidding. It was
always the threat of being kicked out. And I was like, I can't live with the threat of being kicked out of my own house anymore. Right. Like I need to be in a safe place. I can't do this. So, but I did express to my mom some of my issues back in 2018 when I was having a really dark time. I just one day through tears was like, Mom, I don't think anyone's listening to my prayers. And then she was just like, you're not praying for the right things. You're not giving him anything to bless because you're not going to the meetings. And I remember it really upset me, especially now, because in COVID times, no one's attending meetings. They're all attending via Zoom, and most of them don't even have their cameras on. They might as well just be calling in. And I'm like, I was being bashed for calling in because I was not well. And I just couldn't put on a dress and attend a meeting of 100 people. I just didn't have that in me.
Yeah.
And I would be frowned at for that. And now I'm like, that's all people are doing. And it seems to be fine. So it really bothered me that was the response, because I was like, Mom, like, you've watched this firsthand and you're telling me that I'm the problem. And it was just hard. So I knew that it wasn't a good conversation to have. So I waited quite a long time.
I was going to say, this isn't long ago. This is, half a year to a year.
Yeah.
So do they talk to you still, but like from a distance?
Sometimes, periodically. I was actually surprised because I thought that of my parents that my mom would take it worse than my dad. But it's really been the other way around. My dad just is not really interested in talking to me at all. I still try and I'll reach out from time to time, but the last real conversation we had on the phone, it was just, it's just a sadness in his voice. And it was really, really hard to hear because my dad is kind of like me in the sense that he just kind of talks with this happier tone, I guess. And then to hear his tone just kind of change to
disappointment.
Yeah, like, sweetie, I can't condone what you're doing. I can't be supportive of that. And I'm like, why, Dad? Like, you and Mom had no problem supporting me when I was dating guys who treated me like garbage just because they held titles in the congregation. And now here I am with someone who treats me properly and really cares and would like to know you guys, and you don't even care to know where I am or who I'm with to make sure I'm safe. Like, it was really difficult. But my mom has been a little bit more inclined to talk if I reach out. She's called me a few times and we've had conversations, but they don't really go well. And my parents, I know that they think that they're doing what's right. Like, I have no animosity towards them at all because I understand. I've been them with other people. But it's really hard because I think the worst thing that happened was that my mom and some of my aunts and uncles got together and they buried my grandpa's ashes back in the summer, and they didn't tell me. And that was probably the worst thing that happened for me, because that was really important for my closure, because he was being buried with my grandma and I just really needed to see them put back together again. And to not be told was quite upsetting. That's probably the worst thing that's happened. And, you know, I feel like they could have handled it a little bit better. But again, I'm not mad at them. I know that they're trying to do what they think is right. But the conversations they're pretty bland at this point. They don't really go too far. So
that's sad. Yeah, that's sad. So the church, do they know that you're POMO, that you're physically out, mentally out?
Oh, I actually don't know, because I haven't taken the time to like write a letter or anything. I think I will eventually. I've talked about it a bit, and I'm waiting for like a specific moment that just hasn't happened yet, because I do want to make that clean break for myself. But I'm trying to wait and kind of leave the door open for my family as much as I can. But there's a cutoff eventually where I'll be like, I don't want to be a statistic for them anymore. But I did have someone from my congregation stumble across my YouTube channel in its very early days. So I'm not really sure what people are aware of and what they're not. But I knew the consequences when I set it up. I thought anybody can find this, and I was okay with it, but it happened way sooner than I thought it would. I was like, oh man.
Yeah, I was going to say, I want to make a comment. The numbers that they put on their website and they tell everybody, she's playing a part of those numbers. She's not the only one. Some of the other people that I interview, they're not apostatized yet. They're still counted as numbers according to the JWs. And really, there's a lot of people who aren't there now that they're using as numbers for their statistics. So yeah, I don't blame you. But at the same time, I also don't blame you for trying to keep the door open, not necessarily saying you want to walk back in the church, but keeping the communication between you and your family open, because elders can go right to your parents and try to, hey, this is what you have to do now. You have to cut her off, and then you can't talk to them at all. That's just horrible. I can't wait till we can make that change, like to force this cult organization to evolve in a place where they don't do that to family members. But you have a YouTube channel. Tell us what the YouTube channel is about.
Well, it's really, I have ideas for what I want it to be, but I still haven't fully like picked the direction I want it to go. For me, it's a lot about myself kind of sorting through my thoughts and emotions about things I've been taught and the problems that I'm seeing now. And I also was like, you know what? I felt like I had a voice when I was in the congregation, and there's no reason for me to not have a voice now that I'm on the outside. And I feel like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, if anyone's ever spent time with me and doesn't feel like they're comfortable with me. I feel like I can make people feel comfortable to talk to me, and that I can make people feel less alone. And I really like doing that. So I thought, let's just try and see if I can get comfortable in front of a camera and see if I can help people who are going through similar things to feel like there's someone else out there who gets it, and maybe even get a little bit more into, I guess, debunking some of the doctrine and pointing out the problems with it. I find I have more fun, though, when I'm talking about things I can really relate to, more than trying to be like an academic about it all.
Right.
I'd rather just be like, this was my experience, and these are some of the questions that kind of came up when I was faced with these different situations and choices, and what do you guys think? So it's really more of a conversation at this point, but I'm hoping eventually it might become a tool to maybe help people have better conversations if they are being shunned by people, or if they have witnesses knock on their door someday. Maybe if we can find a constructive way to even just like plant a seed for a potential question in the future to come up, I think that would be cool to kind of get thoughts and ideas out there and see what we can come up with, see if we can find a way to get through to people.
You know, I think that, first of all, I want to say, you know, I definitely appreciate you saying that, and not trying to necessarily, and not saying you won't tap into academic approaches to try and, you know, dispel some doctrine over time. But I personally think it isn't the doctrines 99% of the time that actually get people out. I think it's an experience, some type of experience that gets them out. That's just typical. And in fact, most of the time, the people that I've talked to that are ex-JW, that left because of doctrine were men. I don't know why. I think it's something like, all right, you know, JT and Lady C, I interviewed them on our channel. That he was a Bethelite. Anyway,
Okay.
he said in 1975, you know, the whole false prediction thing that happened. He said, my hat goes off to everybody in 1976. It was the doctrine that red flagged him. So he was like, oh my gosh, he started researching. Now, I bet you though, we men recall doctrine. The thing is, it's my guess that there might have been something we don't really register in our minds prior to checking and seeing if doctrines are false. Women are much more open to the whole, she was rude to me, or the church just didn't treat me right, or my mom and dad didn't act like they were living according to the life of a JW, you know, like, and women are tapping into that stuff, while we guys are like, yeah, it was 72 times 35 and they got the calculation. Come on, man. You know, we think it's all just doctrine, even though it does play a role. So I don't know. It's interesting. I think coming at it from that emotional side and giving someone something to connect to on the outside sounds very good, that what you're trying to do there. And there's that going from, you had your whole life packaged for you in the JW. You had a life that they told you how to live and everything. You knew what you were doing. When you came out, how did that work? You know what I mean? Were you a little confused on like, what am I allowed to do? What am I supposed to do? Should I go back? I suspect a lot of people look back as they're leaving. They're kind of like, am I doing the right thing? Should I go back? Like, did that cross your mind?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Well, the biggest thing for me, of course, has always been the resurrection, the idea of seeing people that you've lost coming back again. And especially having my grandpa pass away, you know, right in the middle of it all. I was like, I really don't know if I can accept not seeing him again, and not seeing my grandma again, and seeing ones that I lost when I was in high school again. Like, I really felt like I just didn't know if I was going to be able to handle that, because I didn't feel like I'd ever properly grieved it. I've spent my entire life pretty much thinking that my grandma was going to come back, and I would be so excited to be like, hey, grandma, I'm grown up now. I'm not 6 anymore. Look at me. Look what I've done. And to see her and my grandpa together again was a big driving force. And it is a big driving force for my whole family. It's probably the one thing that I get like stonewalled with when I try to talk to my mom, is just, oh, so you're telling me I'm not going to see my parents again? And I'm like, I guess, you know, it's like, how do you get around that? Because you know that that's something that people are holding on to and is getting them through their days. But when you realize that it's false, it's like, how do you disconnect someone from that belief without literally shattering their entire world? Like, it makes me really conscious of what I'm saying, especially if I'm talking to my family, because I don't want them thinking that I don't care about my grandparents. I do. I just drove up to their grave back in the fall because I felt like I just wanted to go and be where they were. And it's a 10-hour drive from here, and I went, and, you know, I care, but I just know that I can't live my life thinking they're going to come back if there's no good reason to think that. And then if they do, that's great. But I can't not learn how to grieve things. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to get by. And I'm carrying this weight. And not even being able to grieve death has really just altered my entire way of dealing with traumatic issues. I'm really finding that one of the things that's coming up now is there's a lot of trauma in me that I didn't really realize was trauma until now. And that there's these moments where something will happen and I'll get this like really severe feeling that feels like rage, except you're not really mad. And I've learned that that's a trauma response. It's in your body and it's hurting you. And so that's the kind of thing I'm starting to work through now, because there's a lot of things that I didn't realize had harmed me. I didn't realize that my entire image of myself and what I'm worth and what I deserve and could have was just completely shattered. And now I'm really trying to build that back up, build up self-esteem and have confidence in the things that I am good at, and be like, I do deserve good things. And I shouldn't just tolerate people who want to treat you like garbage just because you believe the same thing. Like, you should stand up for yourself and have the fight when the fight needs to be had. But it's really changed a lot. That's for sure. It's been a bit of a process working through it all. That's for sure.
You have said so many really good things there. And I don't mean everything is actually good. Some of the things you mentioned are like hitting home and that are deep. You know, the whole idea of resurrection that you bring up, that's a great tool to really grab people. If you ever want to make a cult, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you have some teaching in there that you'll move on past death. Somehow, something, in some way, shape, or form, you're going to come back, or you're going to see them again, like all that kind of stuff. It makes sure that's incorporated. That's just all you have to do right there, because we humans naturally want to be with those we love and want to see those we love. So all it takes is a little bit of that. Add that into your seasoning and your little concoction, and you have yourself a potion that's going to really keep people latched on. Mm-hmm. It's really sad that is what they pull off of, because right there I can see the trauma in the idea of wanting to go back, because the promise of seeing your loved ones afterlife, like forever, you're never going to see them again. Like, all that scares the living daylights out of you, that they teach you that kind of stuff. When in all honesty, it's likely, if there isn't any afterlife, of course. And I say that just because I try not to offend fans who might have these concepts. Mm-hmm. What if we just rest in peace forever? What if once you're dead, the memories and the life we have now is how we live on? Mm-hmm. So I say that to say, like, is it really worth, do some investigation? That's what I'm trying to ask, because I understand why you think that way. The church teaches that. So does many other churches in different types of religions. Why not do a little critical thinking and consider testing those ideas and looking at why we believe those type of ideas? Most people don't care about the facts, though. Like I said, it just boils down to, does this make my life better? Do I feel like it helps me? Does it feel good? And what you're experiencing here are the repercussions of coming to believe those things, or being taught from a young age those things, and now having to find life outside of those things, when they tell you, if you're not in here, if you're not in this, you won't have those things. Yep. But I didn't choose to be part of this. I was born into this. It doesn't matter. That's how messed up this is. And the sad part is, the people who taught it to you don't mean anything bad. They think that they were past the same BS and gave the same package BS to the next person. So that's how sad this thing is in terms of this continuous vicious cycle. Everyone who's going to leave the JWs that was born into it has to go through this experience, and this, what you're going through right now. What would you say would be the best thing you did during this transitional phase? Because I know it's depressing. It's gotta suck. It hurts. What helped you? Were there people you talked to? Was there an activity in particular that you did? Something you researched that made a certain type of music? Like, what has helped you mourn the potential loss of not ever seeing them again, based on the doctrines, which you didn't know whether they were right or wrong yet? In your mind, you weren't convinced that they weren't true. You were partially like battling this thing in your mind as you continue to deconvert from Jehovah's Witnesses. So what did you do?
Well, definitely letting go of the resurrection hope was probably the final thing. It was the very last thing I held on to, obviously. Even when everything else fell apart, I was like, I don't know if I can let go of this. But what I did that really helped me to just get to a place of being confident, and what I was believing at that point, was just filling my mind with information. I really enjoyed learning about evolution, and I am by no means any kind of like expert on the subject at this point, but I definitely know a lot more than I did when I was a Jehovah's Witness. And you're under the impression as a Jehovah's Witness that you know everything there is to know, when really it's just a horrible misrepresentation of the facts. And now I feel like I have a really good knowledge. And I honestly was just filling my head with that for like maybe a couple of months. And as I saw how undeniably, like factually correct evolution is, I was like, this makes everything else fall apart, because my belief system is based on the fact that the Genesis story to the book of Revelation is all true. Genesis is not just a myth. It's supposed to be a real thing that happened. And I was like, it simply can't be if this is how things work. And it made the Noah story fall apart too, because things don't evolve this quickly. Even if you try to say to yourself that the animals on the ark have evolved to what we have today, it's just, it mathematically, and I'm not a math wizard by any means, just mathematically not possible based on the speed of evolution. And just filling my head with that knowledge and feeling like I really had something solid to start with was really helping me to be like, okay, like this might not be true, but this is all really interesting. And there's an entire view of the world that I've been missing out on my entire life. And it's a good view. The world is really interesting and there's a lot going on. And
it's not that bad. It's really not that bad. I have to say, I saw this debate. You'll probably get a little chuckle out of this, I suspect, or at least think, damn, that makes a lot of sense. It was a Muslim debating an apostate Muslim. Okay. I love all of that. So, you know, you're in the JW vein. And what I like about what you said is you didn't just stick to the JW routine, which is why I predicted things that didn't actually come true. I promise you I was testing you, though. I knew the future, you know. No, but seriously, you went in a different path, and how you did this is the Genesis. I keep hearing Genesis in your, and that's in your future too. No, I'm just kidding. No, but I could tell like that the Noah's flood Genesis narrative, if it flaps or becomes allegory or becomes mythology or something, JW, wash your hands, because their entire premise is it's factual, it's true. If they change that idea, then they're changing things, and we know it's BS, just like they do with the predictions. But anyway, I was going to say this: the apostate Muslims debating this Muslim. The apostate Muslim's not even saying anything. I think a question was posed to the Muslim. Look, is it a religion of peace? Right now, I know some peaceful Muslims. Don't get me wrong. That's not my point. Okay. The point I'm trying to get at is the religion itself. Okay. Like the book in which it's based off of says to fight these infidels and whatnot. And the question was posed to the Muslim, and he says, you know, what do you do with this? How do you answer this? You know, they're supposed to fight the infidel. And he says, listen, okay, he's trying to justify it. Using his book, the same thing with the JW, same thing with every other religion. They do the same thing. They go to the book. They say, yeah, here you go. Yeah. And he says out of the book, he says, you know, yes, you're supposed to attack the infidel because the infidel, the person who's not a follower of Allah, is inherently bad. And the world is bad, and they will attack you. They're going to come after you. So get to them first. Like, so how is it a religion? And the apostate's like going like this on video, like, don't you see it? And the guy's not even seeing it. He's like, no, and Allah. And he's using the book, and he's like, you can't even see that. Like, what you're saying is the world's bad out there, and they're out to get me. So I need to attack them first and to try and conquer them first. It's like, how is that a religion of peace? I mean, you view the world. That's a good question, because technically the JW religion isn't a religion of peace too. Yes, they might be pacifist and not before war. Yes, they might be this, but my point about it isn't necessarily war type peace. It's the whole forms. The whole world is wicked and bad and evil and ruled by Satan and his demons. And you, as long as you're not in this church, in this organization, are being ruled by him. So your relationships, how you view the world and everything is not peaceful in your mind, whether you're going to attack it or not. You may not be, you might be a pacifist. That's what most JWs are. They're like, we don't want to hurt others. They're more like martyr-ish, if you will, like hurt me, if anything, but they still view the world that way. That it's just, it blows me away. Like, how the world is this horrible, horrible place. What's your experience on that? Has the world been a horrible, horrible place to you, or?
Oh no, I really don't think the world is a horrible place. Like one of my things, and a lot of people disagree on me with this, but fair enough. My viewpoint is this. Back in the early days of Jehovah's Witnesses, you were told that the world was going to get worse and worse. Critical times hard to deal with, about 100, 140 years ago. And at that point, the population of the world was like 1 billion. And now we're pushing 8 billion. And you would imagine that in that period of time, if everyone being born is further and further from perfection, and the world's supposed to get worse and worse, I would imagine that at this point, with 8 billion very, very imperfect people of the final days living on this planet, I would not be able to walk out my front door without fear of somebody dropping a bomb on me. And I know that there's places where that is a fact, but I would just expect that you'd be in fear everywhere in the world, not just in certain places. It just doesn't seem reasonable that the world is supposed to be so terrible and that people are so awful. And I'm like, my experience is, yes, people can be misguided at times, but I genuinely like to feel that people are good. And that if we start with the assumption that people are good and then they do things later that aren't so good, then you've got reason to be like, okay, maybe I don't want to associate with this person or write them off, I guess. But it's better to assume that people are good than just to assume everyone's bad and they're just bad for no reason and cast them all aside. Because when you go out and you meet people and they're kind and they do things, it makes your life full to experience the goodness in other people. And one of my big things that I say all the time is, I may not be an active Jehovah's Witness, but I recycle. I care about the planet. I'm nice to my cats. And I do what I can to be environmentally conscious. I try to donate to charities that I see are reputable and are going to good, worthy causes. I don't think I'm a horrible, rotten person. The Bible didn't need to tell me to do those things. I just wanted to do those things. So I don't know why I'm worse when there's people who are Jehovah's Witnesses who are like, well, Jehovah will never let the world be destroyed. So maybe it's not a big deal if we recycle all the time, because he'll reverse the damage done to the world. He won't let humans ruin it beyond repair. Like, I feel like it's a big cop-out when you just always revert back to, well, God's going to fix everything. So it doesn't really matter what we do now. It doesn't matter if we vote to try to improve the conditions of the areas we live in. It doesn't matter if we participate in a volunteer work in the area to pick up garbage or to feed the hungry. It doesn't really matter because God's going to take care of that in his time. Whereas it's like, I want to do things now to try to make the world a little bit better than I found it. And then here's everyone else being like, well, we're better than you, but we'll just leave everything in God's hands for his time. I'm like, how is that better?
Yeah, I can totally relate. I used to be that way. So I know exactly, like you're describing the way I was as a Christian to, of course, where I am now. I'm more in your shoes now. Like, I 100% agree with everything you just got done saying. That's really, really powerful. It's just amazing. It's amazing what happens. And the people who are usually doing the least to try and better are the ones who are saying everyone else is making things worse or they're worse. It's it's just unbelievable how we see it now. Like, almost like our perception completely changed, and we almost look at ourselves and go, I understand why I was doing that, but I was completely blinded and I didn't realize. And everyone that's, serious about JWs, the Jehovah's Witness, in my opinion, and this is a bold statement, it's going to sound really rude, and I don't mean this bad, are blinded. They just cannot see what we're seeing and why, because they have so many things that prevent them from being allowed to even do that.
A lot of
you're not allowed to doubt that. Don't doubt that. Now, if you start doubting, you need to tell an elder, and you're not supposed to look at this. Don't talk to apostates. Don't look at apostate material. What the hell? You know what I'm asking people to do? Check it all out. Go research the JWs. Go check out the Mormons. Go look at all the religions. Check out Buddha. Give it a shot. Look at this stuff. And then investigate it critically. Using a scientific method. Tell me if it stands or falls apart. And, you'll come to conclusions. So someone right now, playing a hypothetical here.
Okay.
Someone right now is, what is it? Physically in, mentally in and out. They're kind of sitting on the fence. They're wanting to possibly, they don't know where to go. They don't know what to look at. What would you recommend them in your own personal subjective approach to this? What would you say that they probably need to do if they're going to consider, like, how are they going to come about leaving?
Well, I guess if it comes to, if you're feeling like you're having struggles with your actual belief system, then my best piece of advice is do the research. And I don't mean just look for random data points that support your belief system. I mean, look for what is true, not just what you want to be true. And that was something that I thought I always did. And it wasn't until I started seeing things that I didn't necessarily agree with that I was like, I am trying to prove my bias. I'm not actually looking for what's true. I'm looking for what I want to be true. I want it to be true. I'm going to see my grandpa again, right? So I was like, I need to start thinking about these things that I don't necessarily like. I didn't like that evolution was coming together so easily for me. I didn't like it, but I just kept going into it anyways and watching some videos that were easy for me to understand because I did not have the knowledge at the time. But I would just say if there's anything that you feel really certain of, but you can't really express why, do research into trying to figure out if you can justify your beliefs and justify it with more than just a personal experience or a feeling, actual evidence that other people can see and understand would be probably my best route to go if you're questioning your beliefs. Pick the things that you're like not sure about, see if you can find a way to justify it through natural means is probably the best way. If you can't find an explanation in the natural world, then maybe you have something, maybe you have a reason to be wondering about other things. It doesn't necessarily mean we can't explain it, therefore God. It just means that there's more to it than you originally thought. But,
or at least try to see why we may not, if you're going that far, which is pretty far to go when you're just in the JW church, because you're way over here, you know, when they're not even close to probably having enough information yet to even know if we don't have answers for certain things.
Oh yeah, that's
and and that doesn't mean there isn't a natural explanation. So that's the interesting thing, is it's like we just may not have that answer yet. We didn't have answers for a long time. Darwin, you know, the little black box, I think it was called, which was the DNA. They didn't have the scientific evidence of seeing within the DNA and checking that far into us. And now we do. It's like we may not understand certain things, like prior to the Big Bang, like what happened prior to the Big Bang. I mean, people are like, well, that's God did that, and this is everything that starts has a cause. And it's like, okay, here we go with the Kalam cosmological argument, trying to, you know, that's way outside of what I think a JW would care about, but it's worth looking into, like you said, and considering other avenues of critical thinking. Test your religion. I would say ask yourself, why is yours true and theirs wrong? Because they say the same thing. Keep that in mind when you're, and that doesn't prove anything. But what that does for me, and this is part of my journey, was how do I know that mine's true and theirs is wrong? They say they had the same experience. They felt something. They felt justified and right. They knew in their heart of hearts, the same old phrase, you know, they had the truth. And the Mormons say it, and the JW say it, and the Muslims say it, and the Buddhists say it, and you name it. Hindus especially, I've been watching them debate. They sound very much like Christians with just polytheistic tendencies. It's just very similar. Why is yours right and yours wrong? And give a good reason. You can't just, you know, you can't just say, well, I felt it. They felt it. How can you say they're wrong? You know, so
I thought I felt God's hand in my life too. I get it. I guess to simplify it, maybe just to refine my answer a bit, would be even just taking the time to make sure you're not conflating two things. Because I find a lot of times, especially when I think about evolution, the first thing people say is, oh, so you're telling me that that we all came from a big bang and monkeys. And I'm like, okay, wait, those are two different things. And no. But even just making sure you have an understanding of what the other side's argument might be, and not just getting that information from Watchtower publications, because you need, like, you just expect that it's going to be like a perfect explanation of the other side's argument, when everybody who's making that literature is being told not to research such things. It doesn't really make sense to be going to that literature and saying, yes, this is the end all be all. This is where the real information is. Just kind of stepping outside that box. Maybe you don't want to go to an apostate website, but reading a book, if you have time to read, I know not everybody does, listening to an interesting podcast. I really like listening to Bill Nye's podcast because he's just so easy to listen to. And he can talk about subjects that when I read the title, I'm like, that sounds kind of boring. And then I listen to it and I'm like, this is fascinating. And you'll get book recommendations, just doing things that kind of expand your knowledge on the things that you think you know, but you might not know.
When you said the Watchtower publication, I remember years ago, a Jehovah's Witness came to my house and handed me one. And I walked inside and there's this cartoon. They always have a cartoon. Like, I'm sorry. I love cartoons, by the way. I'm an adult, right? Like, I like anime, Dragon Ball Z, like you name it. I like stuff like that. But I know that's not reality, right? Like, I know it's a cartoon. I love pretending like Kamehameha. Like, I can do all that, like, I know it's just fiction.
Yeah.
When I see the cartoons on the front of these magazines or inside, as soon as you open the page, there's this little boy and little girl walking with a lion and a tiger and an elephant and I'm thinking in my head, like, it's almost a fiction, like a cartoon, like the way that it's there. It's like, how is this any different than L. Ron Hubbard writing the fact that Xenu and aliens abducted from 27 different planets were frozen with dry ice and brought to planet Earth and planted like seeds inside volcanoes. And then we evolved from the volcanoes, or I can't remember, like the spirits of them or something. I can't even remember, but like, he was a fictional writer, and then the Scientologist church comes up. How is this any different?
Laugh at these things, and Jehovah's Witnesses will laugh at these things, and it's like, you're laughing, and meanwhile on the other side they believe it's true and they're laughing at you. Like, it's so crazy how that comes around, how you can be a Jehovah's Witness and you can laugh at the beliefs of the Mormons, and you can bash the beliefs of the Catholics. You can bash it and say that it doesn't give you any hope to believe that when your child dies, that they're in heaven with God. Like, they can look at that and say, that's such a stupid thing to believe. Why would you believe that? That doesn't give you hope. And it's like, but what you believe isn't even really based on anything. When you actually look at the Bible, the resurrection hope to a life on a paradise earth, that's not scripturally based. It's really not. It makes sense for people to believe in heaven than that.
Yeah, there's different. The reason why I think it's complicated, and this just gets into some of the source stuff, is that there's more than one teaching, I think, going on in the Bible of these ideas. And some of the stuff potentially is taken out of context. Like Bart Ehrman was, he's a PhD scholar in New Testament. He wrote a book pretty much talking about annihilationalism, which is what you guys teach at the JWs. I don't mean you as in like you're currently that, but yeah, I'm sorry. No.
Annihilation, Alicia.
but yeah, that there was that teaching, but there was also an eternal conscious torment type of idea, and it may not have been called that, of course, but it was the idea that forever you will face the suffering. But then you got the Catholic Church that has a purgatory type concept that you go through a phase and then gradually work out of. Some people are in hell, some people are in this phase that gradually work out of into heaven. And then you have these strange mythologies that I see from the allegories, like Lazarus and the rich man, that story of the parable, touch it on water and just touch my tongue with the water, comes from a Greek tragedy of a man named Tantalus. And Tantalus, his punishment was he was in a lake and the water came up to his lip right here, but he was thirsty too, but it was right here and it never went into his mouth. He could never get it. So the whole time he always had water here and he was always thirsty. It's like the worst. It's like there's a fireplace in sight, but you're freezing forever. I mean, it's like, but it's a mythology. So it's like anyone who takes this stuff literally, do some critical thinking.
Yeah, pretty much.
Alicia, plug your material. How can people do you put yourself out there for people to be able to contact you and talk to you? Or
yeah, I mean, I try to. Right now I just have a Twitter because I mean, I don't love social media. I used to have social media and I deleted it as I left the organization because it was hard to watch everybody blocking and deleting me. So for now I have a Twitter and I have an email that you can reach me at. It's aliciawhat'sgood@gmail.com. And it's on my YouTube channel as well. You can find it there. Okay. I have people email me from time to time and I do try my best to respond, but I actually get quite a bit. So I try not to do it every single day so that I don't drain myself, but I do try to get back in a timely manner. And then of course you can always find me on my YouTube channel. I try to put stuff out as often.
What's the name of that channel?
Eve 2.0.
Eve 2.0. That's her name right here on here.
Yeah.
Lisa, thank you so much. Everybody go down into the description of this video right now. You will see her links. You can go check her out, follow her on Twitter, give her positive words, tell her how amazing she is, how awesome she is, and really intelligent. This was a really wonderful interview. I greatly appreciate you bringing up some of these topics. Unlike some of the XJWs that I brought up, you brought up some stuff that is more at my heart, if you will, of things that help me start to leave the box and look outside, So I have to thank you for that. This has been a wonderful interview. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, let's do this again sometime. I'm going to try and get a collaborative method amongst the XJWs, and we could do like a hangout XJW party on YouTube or something. And I'll probably make it like a fun little game where we'll have Q&A and ask questions amongst you guys and just have a good old time. So
absolutely. I will be in. That's for sure.
Awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, go check it out down there. I do have merch now. You guys can join the Patreon if you want to help us grow and continue doing what we're doing here. That helps me in my efforts. And doing that, like this video, hit that bell when you subscribe, and never forget, we are Myth Vision.